My name is Paulien and I'm Curator Human History at the museum. I've been there now for 4 years and I'm very passionate about local history. And I was led to this topic by the Darfield Genealogy and Local History group. So they emailed and asked if I wanted to do a talk on treasures from their local area. And I was more than happy to oblige because Selwyn is also one of our contributing local authorities, so it's really important to know what we have that is connected to Selwyn in the collection. And quite a bit of work around that was done when they were developing Te Ara-Atia, the library in Rolleston, which also has display cases. But still, this was a really good challenge. And also, yeah, it's important for the new museum because we're trying to get a good representation of all those districts in the museum. So it was a bit of a challenge. The way I went about it was I searched all the different place names in Selwyn on our database. Not all of them, sorry, a lot of them. But this was tricky because not all the records have place names associated with them. Yeah, so it kind of narrows down the results that you end up getting. The other way to do it is, I knew of some people who were connected to the Selwyn district. And so I could search their names, and it might not say that they're from there, but you just have to know that information. So it can be a bit tricky. Trying to figure this out essentially. And then there are so many objects that it's not recorded where they've actually come from. So it does make things a bit tricky. So you'll see because I searched in this way, the resulting objects are quite varied. There is a bit of a mix in there. I've obviously tried to pick out interesting stories and try and give you a bit of a sense of the breadth as well of the collection. I'm not going to talk too much about the history of Selwyn and so on, just more like as it comes up with the objects. But it is interesting to think about the boundaries of the district, which have changed over time, and are of course tied to the surveying and marking out of land by the colonial government. And the first concept of something like Selwyn district came about when the provincial government was abolished in 1876 and New Zealand was divided into counties. So it is that's interesting to think about. But one of the key themes that emerged from my searches, and it perhaps reflects the impact of war on small and rural communities, and that these were often objects held onto by families as stories of war. And I've tried to represent a few different things here. So this actually came into the collection really recently from a man in Darfield, and they've been passed through the family of the donor's wife. And it includes a diary, a photograph, and a letter connected to Albert Hawkins from Waddington and Annie Atkinson from Springfield. So the entries in this diary were written by Sergeant Albert Thomas Hawkins while on active service during the South African War, or Second Anglo-Boer War, in 1902. And that is the letter that came with it and the photograph. So I'll go back and talk about each of these. We'll talk about the photograph first. So this photograph was likely taken, in Albany, West Australia, likely in 1902, when Albert was on his way to South Africa to serve in the war. So that you've got the photographer's mark on there, Duier, I don't know if it's pronounced that way. But the reason we know when it was taken, or likely taken, is because he actually mentions in this letter visiting the photographer, and that he would send copies of the photographs to Annie. And he also said when he first went to South Africa, he also had his photograph taken. So it could have been we're not sure if this photo was 1902 or, the first time he went over there. But it's really interesting to have this confirmed from the letter. And the museum also has some other items connected to the family that were donated by Doris Hawkins, who is Albert and Annie's daughter, as well as some other items related to Annie. So I'll mention those later on. But yeah, this letter was written to my dear Annie, and they ended up marrying each other. So it's very lovely.
Are you going to read it?
Oh, I don't know if I can read it from, that's the first page. But yeah, it starts, I've been ashore this afternoon and just come aboard again, so he's staying on the ship. Albany is the same old place, no improvements, whatever. While on shore, I posted a letter in that watch case containing the articles. Articles I mentioned. I got Sergeant Connolly to send a cable this morning. I would have sent more information in it if I had known cabling from here was so cheap. I thought it would cost me 6p a word at least, but it only cost me 2 and 3 altogether. I kept the spare, no, that's not right, spurs with the barber here to be forwarded to Hubert. I promised them to him, and of course I always keep a promise. So he sent his spurs over as well. So sorry, that's only the first page. And that's, I think that just shows the impact of war on a small community, because that has got Albert Hawkins in there with 4 other boys from the Melbourne district. On to World War I. George Fairbairn was born in Kirwee in Canterbury in 1897, and he served on the Western Front in the 14th Reinforcement of the Otago Infantry Battalion between 1916 and 1917. And during that time, he sent home embroidered postcards and an embroidered handkerchief from France to family and friends at home in New Zealand, including to his sister Maud in Christchurch. So and these items stayed in the family for over 100 years until his son donated these to the museum in 2022, alongside some photographs. So that's young George outside his house in Kirwee, and that's a photograph of him in his military uniform. And then there was some things that came along with the donation as well, from when he returned to Christchurch. There's a tram pass at the bottom there, and then a card for the Returned Soldiers Club. And this is one of the embroidered postcards that he sent. So these were really popular in World War I with Allied soldiers in France, and they were sent home as kind of souvenirs to family and friends. They are in museum collections around the world, but we're very interested in them because of the Canterbury connection, and they form part of Canterbury's World War I story. So this is the back of the postcard. And 3 of the postcards were addressed to M. Emily and M, who's probably Emily Cameron McLean, who George married in Dunedin in 1919. So I'll read you a little bit from the card. Pardon? Oh, sorry, I must have lent on that, sorry. Oh. There we go. So this is a large portion of the card at the bottom. It reads, "We go into the trenches again tomorrow, dear, so I thought I'd better drop you a line before going there, as it is hard to say what will happen there. We have had plenty of rain lately, which made things very miserable while it lasted. The place puts you in mind of Burnside after a few days of rain. The mud is about the same in the trenches. It is over your knees at present, so we will have a very enjoyable time on this occasion." And it is important when you're looking at war letters and postcards that there were censorship laws at the time which controlled kind of what could and could not be communicated about the war effort. So often family and friends didn't know the full extent of the difficulties that people were facing on the front. So this is quite interesting because it's quite frank.
That's Burnside.
I think he means Burnside and Christchurch. Yeah, I think. So another war-related item to do with the Diggers concert party, which was founded by George Patrick Hanna, or Pat Hanna, and formed by New Zealand troops on the Western Front in 1917 as a means of entertainment. So this wooden violin and bow, stored in a case, was used by Roy Longstaff from Glentunnel while he was on tour with the Diggers concert party between 1917 and 1919 during the First World War. And the Diggers actually reformed in 1919 for a fundraiser for the Returned Servicemen Association and continued touring into the 1930s. They were known by several names, so you might have heard of the New Zealand Pierrots, the Diggers, and Pat Hanna's famous Diggers. So this violin is really interesting because you can't see there, but I'll show you another photo where you can see the back of the violin. You kind of see it there. It's been inscribed with all the place names that they visited along the way. So here you can see everything that's sort of etched onto there. So that's all the places, I think, France, Belgium, Germany, that they visited, which is pretty cool. And so Roy sadly died aged 38, and he was partner in his father's saddlery business at Glentunnel, and I found his obituary, which said he was a keen sportsman involved in many societies. Quote, Mr. Longstaff was a member of practically every local society and institution, and he had been the violinist in the Glenata band since its inception. Now, I haven't found out exactly what the Glenata band was, but it might have been to do with Glentunnel and Hororata or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but a local band. And so here's another war-related item, which I've written a blog about if you're interested. But this is a bayonet, which is the sharp weapon of war attached to the barrel of a rifle. And it was donated by Dr. Jessie Scott in 1944. So she was born in Brookside in 1883, which is about 40 kilometres southwest of Christchurch. And she studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh, graduating in 1909, when medicine was still very male-dominated. And she returned to New Zealand and led an isolation hospital in Auckland during the smallpox epidemic of 1913. And then, of course, World War I broke out, and she volunteered as a doctor for the Scottish Women's Hospitals for Foreign Service, which was a group of volunteers offering medical support for the war. And they set up this organisation because the governments didn't want the services of women doctors. So they set up this voluntary service. And she ended up working in Serbia until 1915. And she was part of a group who refused evacuation to stay behind and help soldiers when troops invaded Serbia. So this is Jessie Scott. And we don't know exactly how she came to have this bayonet, which is from Bulgaria and made in the 19th century, so that remains a bit of a mystery. But we think it's highly likely she acquired it during her time as a battlefront medic. And I've included her. I came across her because I was searching. I knew about her and I wanted to see if we had anything related to her in the collection, which is when this came up. And then I found out she was from Selwyn. So that's the avenue I went on there. And she also became, she was actually deputy chairwoman of the Women's War Service Auxiliary in World War II. So that's not her badge, but it is a badge from the WWSA. And we also have some minute books of the Canterbury branch of the WWSA. So she continued to be involved in war efforts. So next I'll talk about Charles Edward Warden. So he's also connected to war in a different way. And one of our long-standing volunteers, Margaret Lovell Smith, has done some research on him for the Voices Against War project, which is about those throughout Canterbury who opposed conscription and militarism. So Scottish-born Charles Warden, he was dismissed from his job with the Lyttelton Harbour Board in 1917 due to his views on military service. He was later sentenced to 12 months hard labour after telling the court that, and this is a quote from Margaret's blog, the Military Service Act was unconstitutional, unjust and unchristian and could not be enforced by any Christian government. He moved to Arthur's Pass after the war, taking with him some handmade photography equipment from Scotland. And in 1927, he recorded the first use of skis at Arthur's Pass with his camera, which is pretty cool. And in 1929, at the first meeting of the Arthur's Pass National Park Board, he was made the first resident park ranger, which was a part-time position. And he was also vice president of the Canterbury Mountaineering Club. And he remained a ranger until 1937. And we're very lucky to care for over 100 glass plate negatives taken by Warden. So I'll show you a few of those. So this is 4 women in skis at Arthur's Pass. 4 people walking through the snow. More snow. There's some people coming down the hill there. I don't know if you can see. They're on a sled at the top. And this could be them after they've tumbled off. Crossing a river, trying not to get wet. And there you can see a very ghostly woman in the corner, which is a bit scary once you see it. But there's a Christmas tree and some presents. And there's some people, I don't know, pretending to make music with pots and pans. I haven't quite figured this one out. And he took some photos of people who lived in Arthur's Pass as well. So yeah, these are very lovely. And a waterfall. Now for some World War II. So this is a backpack and kit bag. This is a kit bag connected to the Dean's family from Homebush. And this backpack was used by Adrian Deans, who's a son of James Deans. So Adrian was Lance Corporal in the 27th Machine Gun Battalion, and he was actually a prisoner of war in Crete, Germany and Poland. And he features in this pamphlet I came across, which were reports on the Italian and German camps and also prison camps in Japanese-held territory that were visited by Red Cross delegates. And these are all accessible online through the Auckland War Memorial Museum website. Yeah, so it's a bit hard. Oh, use this pointer.
Are they indexed?
Yeah, I must have done a search and come across his name because I didn't go through all of them. So I think you can search the text. Yeah. So there's A.D. Dean's Homebush, Canterbury. I don't know if you can read that. So it's a letter from him, 22nd of November. Very pleased to get another clothing parcel from you. I hadn't been expecting one for some time yet, which makes it all the nicer to get it unexpectedly. All you need sent till I let you know will just be toothpaste and brushes, and also strong clothing and boot brushes. I also received some gramophone records and books. We've been getting Red Cross parcels, food, very regularly lately, which is a good thing. We received the other day some German-English dictionaries and grammars, which we had paid for over 9 months ago, and which I thought we would never see. So interesting insight on how he's spending his time, and the fact that he's needing to learn some German, things like that. It's quite an interesting find, and they're quite a good resource if you're interested in having a look. Then the next selection of objects is broadly connected to daily life, family life, and they touch on some aspects of rural life as well. So we can return to Annie Atkinson now, who married Albert Hawkins. So she was from Springfield, and according to family information, was employed by the farmers in Christchurch as a seamstress. She married Albert on his return from the war, and they lived and farmed in Waddington. And they had one daughter, Doris, who I mentioned, who never married and also donated some objects to the museum. So this bag came in from the same person who donated the diary, and it's connected. So the bag came with a ball program, a ball invitation. I'll come back to those, and a mirror and a handkerchief as well. So those are the things that she likely would have had when she was going to a ball. So she would have taken, like the pocket mirror and the handkerchief with her, and used the little pencil to write on her dance program. And that invitation is the Spinsters of Kauai Pass request the pleasure of Miss Atkinson's company at a ball to be held in the schoolroom, and that's on Friday, August 26, 1898. They were really an important way to meet people your own age, meet potential suitors. And contrary to what you might think about a Victorian ball, I have read instances of them going into the wee hours of the morning. So, and that one is the Kauai Pass Benedict's Ball. So she's obviously held on to these as mementos, which is interesting. Then we've got some mourning attire connected to the Mackay family in Kirui. So Victorians had mourning customs, including wearing certain clothing to express sorrow and grief. And there were expectations on how long you were required to wear this clothing for, depending on your relationship with the deceased as well. And there were stages of mourning. So this cream lace could possibly indicate a later stage of mourning. So this is actually a girls and a boys mourning attire. So the girls got a bonnet as well. And they were probably made for the donor's mother, who was Margaret Mackay, and her younger brother Ewan, at the time of the death of their young sister Elizabeth in 1910. And they were living at Kirui at the time, where their father was a station master. And they're made of silk. Yeah. Then next we've got some tussock baskets made from tussock, which my colleague Julia is researching at the moment. So Sarah Cryer arrived in New Zealand as the youngest of 8 children of butcher Moses Cryer and his wife Hannah Matthews. So their family settled at Littleton in about 1849 after trying Nelson and Wellington. So Moses worked for the Canterbury Association, but he also kept a successful butcher's shop. And then he did so well with that he bought a farm at the mouth of the Rakaia River, which he named Waterford. And he became the local squire, a role that Sarah took over after her father's death. So along with farming, horse riding, What photo of her on the horse? Here we go. On her horse Starlight. So she was farming, horse riding, hunting, and did church and other community work. But Sarah and her sister Maria also utilised native tussock to make hats and baskets. So we have two examples of Maria's work that survive in the collection. So that's this one and this one, the beautiful interior, and that's got some sewing things in it as well. And Julia is working currently on identifying the type of tussock that they used, which will be very interesting. And during the First World War, Sarah made tussock baskets as fundraisers, and she also shared the construction technique at classes run by the Ellesmere Technical Association. Then there's this shawl, a hand-knit shawl with scalloped edges made by Carolyn Hewson MacDonald in the late 1870s. So she was born in 1868 at Leaston, and she was the eldest daughter and third of the 9 children of Harriet and Donald MacDonald of Bellevue Farm. And so she made the shawl, knit the shawl with her mother's help when she was a young girl in the late 1870s. And the yarn used for the shawl came from the neighbours, the Mackays, and Mrs. Mackay spun the yarn using wool gathered from the sheep on her farm. And this was given to the Pilgrims Association by Carolyn's youngest sister, Flora, and came to Canterbury Museum when the Pilgrims Association transferred their collection to the museum. And this has been on display Te Araati in Rolleston, but it is very fragile, so it can't be displayed too often. Then these are some recent acquisitions, cookbooks. So cookbooks are very intimate and personal objects, really, because they often are passed down family lines, and they record recipes from different family members and perhaps mark special events and occasions. And they're kind of an insight into the lives of the people who wrote in them. So these cookbooks, which we've got 5 of, were originally owned by Mary Barker, not connected to Alfred Barker and that family, but different line of Barker family. So Mary Catherine Barker had married Henry Barker, and they had 3 daughters and a son. And these recipe books were passed down the female line via her daughter Frances, who also had 2 daughters, and one of those donated the books to the museum. Oh no, sorry. She even gave them to her daughter, who then donated the books to the museum. So they've really been kept as family treasures. So each of the cookbooks does have Mary's name inscribed on the inside, and the oldest one is the most comprehensive, covering a period of at least 50 years, with recipes dating from the 1890s through to 1949. And there's also loose recipes and clippings, which are really interesting. And so we think this was her personal cookbook, which she frequently would have added recipes to. So here are some, that's one of the other ones. And those ones. And this is my colleague Frances and I have worked on these together, and we've started to do a bit of research on them and on the various recipes inside. So there you can see some of the clippings that are in there. So, and there's recipe for lemon drink, and up there a chocolate cake. There's a wedding cake, pound cake.
Cough mixture.
Cough mixture, yeah. So it's all sorts of some like medicinal things as well. Tea rolls, yeah. But they're quite interesting because they don't, to recipes today will say, bake at this temperature for this long and give quite clear instructions. Whereas this doesn't. And so that would have reflected the different cooking equipment they had as well. Where you might not be able to control the temperature as much. So, and this is her with her husband at their golden wedding anniversary. So they didn't live in Selwyn their whole life, but they lived in Darfield for 12 years until about 1940. And she was involved in a few different organisations there, like the Darfield Mothers Union, the Darfield Croquet Club, and she was, this is from her obituary, a prominent member of the Church of England as well. So coming on to talking about some natural history and resources of the Selwyn district. So when we're doing that, it's important to acknowledge the role of mahinga kai for Māori in Selwyn area. And Te Waihora Lake Ellesmere is of great importance, which I'm sure you've heard of. But it's the largest lake in Canterbury and an important link in the chain of coastal lagoons and estuaries that go along the east coast of the South Island. And this is from the Ngāi Tahu website. Quote, Te Waihora is an area of cultural, natural, historic, recreational and commercial importance to many people. It has been described as the most important wetland habitat of its type in New Zealand and is important for many migratory wader bird species and threatened indigenous species. It has a high bird population of many diverse species, and it also supports many indigenous fish species. So, and I'll get onto some of those birds in a second. But for Ngāi Tahu, so this is again from their website, Te Waihora has outstanding significance as a tribal taonga representing a major mahinga kai and an important source of mana. And there are many taonga Māori from the Selwyn district at Canterbury Museum. I would really encourage you to visit, I've mentioned it a few times now, but Te Ara Atia, the library in Wollaston, where some of these taonga are on display. And it's really important for us that they're displayed within the area that they come from. And you can learn more about their rich history there. But one of the taonga that's on display there is this patu or fishing club. And that's on loan to them. And this has a very unique design. Now, I don't know enough about this to tell you more, but I've been told that this design is very unusual and unique. And another item that's on display there is this toki or ads from the Castle Hill area that came to the museum in 1971. And also in Selwyn, it's important to think about those mahinga kai routes across the region. For instance, the Waimakariri River has been a source of nourishment for Ngāi Tahu, and the river was also a traditional travel route to Taipōtini, the west coast, and frequently used to access the rich mahinga kai resources in the lakes of the Canterbury High Country. Oh, and also if you're interested, you can look into the many Māori names for the places and landmarks in the area, and you can check out Kahuru Manu online, which is the Ngāi Tahu cultural mapping project. So I'd really encourage you to have a look on there. It's really interesting, and you can zoom in on different localities and find out all sorts of information. Now this you might recognise because it's a slide I've borrowed from my lovely colleague Jono, who gave you a talk about connections with different collections. And I went to him and said, oh, I need to have some natural history in my talk. What should I do about the Selwyn area? So he suggested migratory birds, and he let me borrow his slide. So as I mentioned before, Lake Ellesmere is a biodiversity hotspot for migratory birds from all over the world. So I'm sorry if you have seen this before. He's much more technologically advanced than me, so this has got a bit more bang to it. But yeah, that was an early map showing the lake and the surrounding area from 1868. And here are some examples of the distant migrants that ended up on the shores of Lake Ellesmere. So the ruddy turnstone from the Arctic and subarctic tundra, 27,000 kilometres away. The sharp-tailed sandpiper, northern Siberia, 11,000 kilometres away. The far eastern curlew, northern Siberia, Mongolia, northeast China, 11,000 kilometres away. And the Cape Barren goose, which was introduced from Australia and is established now. And then we've got the bittern, which is a rare and declining wetland native bird. And there are only about 30 of those birds known in Canterbury today. And I wanted to include that to show you more of the breadth of the collection as well. Then next, this was more just from finding out more about the history of the area and realising that coal and other minerals were a really important part of the history of Selwyn. So I'm sorry the map's not super clear, but this is a geological map of the Malvern Hills made by Julius Haast in 1871, who was, of course, the founder of the museum. So coal was discovered in the Malvern Hills in 1851, and at this point firewood was already becoming scarce, and all the coal used in the settlement had to be imported. So it was really important that they find more resources in New Zealand. And where there were coal mines, there were pottery works, because clay was found there and the ovens already existed and so on. So that's interesting as well. In 1861, Haast was engaged in the geological surveys in the Malvern Hills as the provincial geologist for Canterbury. And he discovered a seam of coal in the valley of the Kauai River. And there was a mine set up there, but it was later abandoned. There was a large public meeting held in the town hall in 1868 to further discuss the possibilities of mining in the area. I think that's just more of his reports, but including for other minerals. And some people offered really glowing reports, saying, "Oh, you can find this and this," and which wasn't necessarily true. So Haast later responded to those claims in a slightly more measured way. But the next discovery was the Homebush seam in Surveyor's Gully, which proved to be the most productive, and a railway was constructed there. But all mines except Homebush closed by the end of the 1880s. And also what was interesting, there's a bit on Papers Fast if you're interested, about people claiming they found diamonds and rubies, which is not true, but really interesting. So here's some photos of a group of miners at Homebush, and this is unknown to us from the Dean's family. And same with this here, the entrance to Homebush. And then there's some other geological items from the collection from that area. So this is and I don't know anything about this, but I wanted to include it, a Sardonyx cobble from White Cliffs, and some black and white agate from White Cliffs as well. So as I mentioned, where there was coal, there was clay, which is quite interesting. And so This clay mine was less than 200 metres from the Homebush coal mine. And John Deans started manufacturing bricks at Glen Tunnel around 1870 and focused on this product for the next 16 years. And they also manufactured other things like drain pipes and pottery. And they also produced, like I said, other things like this lovely figurine, which we think might have been intended as a doorstop, but we're not sure. And then they sold, the Deans family sold the business in 1924. Here we go. Now, onto something a bit different. I thought I would almost end by mentioning Riwi Ali, who was born in Springfield in Selwyn, and Canterbury Museum, thanks to Riwi Ali, has the largest collection of Chinese art and antiquities in New Zealand. And he moved to China in 1927, living there for the remainder of his life. And he donated a very large collection to the museums over his 60-year career in China. And this is a Mongolian helmet, which today is probably the most well-known item in the Riwi Ali collection that he gifted to us in the 1930s. And I thought I'd end with some images of rural life. So these are photos of some ploughing matches in Kirui, 1948.
Like racing.
Yeah, I think it must have been, it was a competition, yeah. I don't know if it was how fast you could do it or how well you could do it. How neat, okay, there you go.
My dad had a team like that.
Oh, really? Yeah. And then the picture of the Darfield in Christchurch show the tractor display. So yeah, thank you for listening. That was a bit of a whirlwind tour.